Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was a Tuesday, much like any other Tuesday. John, my husband, was deeply immersed in a conference call, his brow furrowed in that familiar way that always made me want to smooth it out. I was puttering around the kitchen, trying to decide whether to make chicken or pasta for dinner. 48 years old, happily married for 25 years, and yet sometimes still stumped by the eternal question, what's for dinner? The doorbell rang, interrupting my culinary contemplation. I glanced at the clock. John wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole. It was Mark, one of John's colleagues from the office. A polite, unassuming man, always courteous at the occasional company barbecue. He was holding a large, slightly crumpled manila envelope. I opened the door, offering a polite smile. "Mark, what a surprise. John's on a call, but I can let him know you're here," I said. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking a bit uncomfortable. "Actually, Susan, it's you. I need to speak with you if you have a moment." My brow lifted. This was certainly unexpected. "Of course. Come on in. Can I offer you some coffee? Or maybe some iced tea? It's still pretty warm outside." He declined, his eyes scanning the living room. "Thank you, but I won't stay long. I have a favor to ask. It's a bit unusual." At this point, my curiosity was piqued. Unusual hardly described the situation. Judging by his demeanor, I half expected him to ask me to help hide a body. I gestured for him to sit on the floral-patterned sofa, a relic from our early married years that I hadn't gotten around to replacing. He sat down carefully, clutching the manila envelope tightly in his hands. "Susan, I know this is going to sound strange, and I apologize in advance for any awkwardness, but I truly believe you're the only one who can help me." He paused, took a deep breath, and finally met my gaze. His eyes were earnest, almost pleading. "It's about John and his photography." John's photography. My Gyan, the accountant, taking photographs. I knew he'd had a hobby back in college, something with a darkroom and smelly chemicals, but I hadn't seen him pick up a camera in years. I had always assumed it was a youthful phase, a passing fancy. John didn't talk much about it. Mark continued. "He was actually quite good, really good, and I have some of his old prints here, some portraits specifically, and I was hoping you might be able to help me identify the subjects." He finally handed over the manila envelope. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were several black and white photographs, carefully preserved. I stopped breathing for a moment. They were beautiful, striking portraits of women, each one captured with an intimacy and artistry I had never associated with my husband. But it wasn't just the artistry that took my breath away. It was the subjects themselves. All young, very young, college-aged, I guessed, and all nude. A wave of shock washed over me, followed by a strange mix of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and something that felt eerily like betrayal from my John. The steady, reliable man I'd known for over 2 decades had harbored this secret life, this artistic past. All this time, Mark cleared his throat, breaking through my stunned silence. I know, it's a lot to take in. The thing is, I'm putting together a small retrospective of John's early work. He doesn't know about it yet. It's supposed to be a surprise, but I need to get permission from the models before I can display them. And I have no idea who they are." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. "I found these in his old office files after he got promoted. I was hoping perhaps you might recognize someone, a friend from college, an old girlfriend. Anything would help." I stared at the photographs again, studying each face, each pose, each subtle nuance of light and shadow. The women were beautiful, confident, vulnerable. They seemed to trust the person behind the camera. The thought that my John had captured these images, had shared this kind of intimacy with other women, was unsettling to say the least. But there was also something captivating about them. They were undeniably powerful, artistic, and strangely innocent. "Give me some time, Mark," I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. "I need to process this." He nodded, understanding. "Of course, Susan. Take all the time you need, And thank you for even considering it." He stood up, the manila envelope now thankfully no longer in my hands. I'll leave you to it." He let himself out, leaving me alone with the photographs and a whirlwind of questions spinning in my mind. My husband, the accountant, the quiet, dependable man, had suddenly become a mystery to me. I realized then that I didn't understand him at all. The house felt strangely empty after Mark left. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder, a constant reminder of the ordinariness of my life, now sharply juxtaposed with the extraordinary revelation in those photographs. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table, spreading the prints out like a hand of cards, dealt from a deck I didn't recognize. Each face, each captured moment, was a story, a whisper from John's past that had remained hidden from me for so long. There was the girl with long flowing hair, bathed in a shaft of sunlight. Her expression was dreamy, lost in a world of her own. Another one, with close-cropped hair and a defiant gaze. Her posture radiated strength, independence, as if she could conquer the world with just one look. And then there was another, even younger, with a tentative smile and a shy vulnerability that tugged at my heart. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, the sweet coolness doing little to soothe the fire burning inside me. Jealousy? Maybe, but it was more than that. It was the sense of displacement, like stumbling upon a hidden room in your own house, filled with furniture and memories that didn't belong to you. I picked up the portrait of the girl with the defiant gaze. There was something oddly familiar about her jawline, the way she held her head. Could she be someone I'd met? A friend of John's from college, perhaps? I sifted through my memories, trying to piece together fragmented images of the past. Parties, weddings, reunions, faces blurred in the haze of time. John had always been tight-lipped about his past, especially his college years. He'd mention a roommate here, a professor there, but rarely spoke about his friends, his experiences, or his hobbies. I had always attributed it to his shyness, a reluctance to dwell on the past. But now, I wondered if there was more to it than that. The conference call finally ended, and John emerged from his home office, stretching and yawning. "Long day," he sighed, heading straight for the refrigerator. Anything interesting happen while I was stuck on that infernal call? My heart pounded in my chest. How could I possibly bring this up? Should I even bring it up? Or should I pretend I hadn't seen the photographs? Let Mark handle it, and bury the whole thing as just another forgotten secret? But the faces of those women, their stories etched in black and white, wouldn't let me. They deserved to be acknowledged. Their voices deserved to be heard. And I deserved to know the truth about my husband. "Mark came by," I said, my voice trembling slightly. John paused, a carton of orange juice halfway to his lips. "Mark, what did he want?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. He had some photographs, old photographs of yours." His eyes narrowed. "Photographs? What kind of photographs?" I gestured toward the kitchen table. "Why don't you come take a look?" He walked over slowly, cautiously, like a man approaching a dangerous animal. When he saw the prints spread out across the table, his face drained of color. He stood there for a long moment, silent and motionless, as though frozen in place. "Where did you get these?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mark found them in your old office files," I replied. "He's putting together a retrospective of your early work. He needs to get permission from the models before he can display them. He was hoping I could help identify them." He didn't say anything, not a word. Just stood there staring at the photographs as if time itself had stopped. He just stared at the photographs, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame, regret, and something else. Something I couldn't quite decipher. "These were from college," he finally said, breaking the silence a long time ago. I can see that I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "Who are they, John? Who are these women?" He hesitated, then sighed heavily. "They were classmates, friends, models. I was exploring my artistic side, exploring your artistic side, by taking nude photographs of young women." I couldn't help the edge of sarcasm in my voice. He flinched. "It wasn't like that, Susan. It was art. It was about capturing beauty, vulnerability, the human form. And you never thought to mention it to me. In 25 years of marriage, he looked down, shame-faced. I was ashamed. I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought you'd be repulsed. Repulsed. I repeated incredulous. John, I'm your wife. You should be able to tell me anything. You looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I know I was wrong. I was stupid. Please just try to understand. It was a different time, a different me. I wanted to scream, to yell, to throw those photographs in his face, but I didn't. I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to understand. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tell me about them, John. I said, my voice softer. Now tell me about these women. Tell me about your photography. Tell me about the man you used to be. He took a deep breath and began to talk. And as he spoke, the man I thought I knew began to unravel, revealing a complex and fascinating person I'd never even suspected existed. He spoke of his passion for art, his struggles with self-doubt, his hopes and dreams for the future. He spoke of the women in the photographs, their names, their stories, their individual beauty. And as he spoke, I began to see them not as rivals or threats, but as individuals captured in a moment of time. Their vulnerability and strength, preserved forever in John's art. I began to understand his shame, his reluctance to share this part of his past. He had been afraid of judgment, of rejection. He had been afraid of losing me. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen. The air grew cooler, and I shivered slightly. John stopped talking. His eyes filled with apprehension. Well, he asked, his voice barely audible. What do you think? I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in the long time, I saw the man. I loved the man who had shared my life for 25 years, but I also saw the boy he had been, the artist he had wanted to be, the man he had hidden from the world and from himself. I think I said that you have some explaining to do to those women. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the emotional storm that had raged within me. The night before, John was unusually quiet at breakfast, his eyes darting to mine, and then quickly away, like a guilty child, caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I finished my coffee in silence, steeling myself for the day ahead. I knew I couldn't just brush this under the rug. The photographs, John's revelations, they had stirred something within me, a longing for something more, a desire to reconnect with the woman I had been before life, marriage, and responsibility had taken over. I think you should contact them, I said, finally breaking the silence. John looked up, surprised. Contact who? The women? Yes, the women Marks, right? You need their permission to display those photographs, and more importantly, you owe them an explanation. He hesitated. I don't even know where to begin. It's been years. I have no idea where they are, or if they even want to hear from me. Then you'll have to find out, won't you? I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Mark said he found the photos in your old files. Maybe there are addresses, phone numbers, something that can help. He nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in thought. I guess you're right. The next few days were a whirlwind of research, phone calls, and dead ends. John spent hours poring over old yearbooks, alumni directories, and social media profiles, desperately trying to track down the women. In the photographs, he managed to find a few, but most of them had moved on, changed their names, or simply disappeared from the digital landscape as I watched him. A strange mix of emotions swirling within me. I felt a sense of pride in his determination, a sense of relief that he was finally confronting his past, but I also felt a pang of jealousy. With each successful contact, each whispered phone conversation, each shared memory from a time before me. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day of fruitless searching, John slumped into a chair, defeated. I don't think I'm going to find them all, Susan. It is just too long ago. I sat down beside him and took his hand. Don't give up, John. Even if you only find one or two, it'll be worth it. He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. You're being incredibly understanding about this. You know, I don't deserve you. I squeezed his hand. Maybe not, but here I am. A few days later, John received an email from one of the women in the photographs, a woman named Sarah. She had seen his message, recognized the photograph, and was willing to talk to him. He was nervous as he dialed her number, his hand trembling slightly. I stood beside him, offering silent support. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice hesitant. "This is John Thompson. I don't know if you remember me." I couldn't hear Sarah's response, but I could see the emotions playing across John's face: surprise, relief, and finally, a hint of sadness. The conversation lasted for over an hour. When he finally hung up, he turns to me. His eyes filled with tears. "She remembers," he said softly. "She remembers the shoot. She remembers the art. She remembers." He went on to explain that Sarah had been a struggling art student back in college, desperately trying to make ends meet. The money she had earned from modeling for John had helped her stay in school and pursue her dream. She had gone on to become a successful painter, and she was grateful for the opportunity John had given her. But she also admitted that the experience had been complicated. She had felt vulnerable, exposed, and somewhat objectified. She had always wondered what John had done with the photographs, if they had been used in a way that exploited her. John had apologized profusely, explaining his intentions, his artistic vision, and his regret for not contacting her sooner. He had asked for her permission to display the photograph in Mark's retrospective, and she had reluctantly agreed on the condition that she could see the final exhibit and have a say in how her image was presented. That conversation with Sarah was a turning point, not just for John, but for our marriage. It forced us to confront the unspoken truths, the hidden resentments, the unfulfilled dreams that had been festering beneath the surface for years. We started talking, really talking about our lives, our fears, our hopes for the future. We rediscovered the passions we had buried, the dreams we had abandoned, the people we had become. John started taking photographs again, not of nude models, but of landscapes, of cityscapes, of the ordinary beauty that surrounded us every day. He found a new sense of purpose, a new way to express his creativity, and I, inspired by Sarah's story, started taking painting classes, something I had always dreamed of doing, but had never had the courage to pursue. I discovered a hidden talent, a way to express my emotions, a way to connect with my inner self. The experience with the photographs had been shocking, unsettling, and at times painful, but it had also been a catalyst for growth, a wake-up call that had jolted us out of our complacency and forced us to reevaluate our lives. We were no longer the same people we had been before. We were older, wiser, and perhaps a little bit more damaged, but we were also closer, more connected, and more in love than ever before. The day of John's retrospective arrived with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Mark had managed to pull together a stunning collection of John's early work, showcasing not only the nude portraits, but also landscapes and street scenes that revealed the breadth of his artistic talent. Sarah, along with a few other women, John had managed to contact flown in for the event. I was nervous about meeting them, unsure of how they would perceive me, the wife of the man who had captured their images so many years ago. The gallery was buzzing with people, a mix of art enthusiasts, friends, and family. I stood beside John, feeling a surge of pride as I watched him greet the guests, his face beaming with happiness. Mark approached us, his eyes shining with excitement. "It's a huge success, John. Everyone's loving it. And the women, they're so happy to be here." He gestured towards a group of women standing near the entrance. Sarah among them. My heart pounded in my chest as I prepared to meet them. Sarah approached me, her hand outstretched. "You must be Susan. It's so nice to finally meet you." I shook her hand, surprised by her warmth and genuine smile. "It's nice to meet you too, Sarah. Dawn has told me so much about you." We talked for a while about her art, her life, her experience with John's photography. She was surprisingly candid, sharing her vulnerabilities and her triumphs. I found myself drawn to her strength and resilience. The other women were equally gracious and welcoming. They shared their stories with me, their memories of John, their feelings about the photographs. I learned that John had been a kind and respectful photographer, a young artist with a genuine passion for capturing beauty. As the evening progressed, I realized that the photographs were more than just images. They were a testament to a moment in time, a snapshot of youthful dreams and aspirations. They were a reminder that everyone has a story to tell, a hidden vulnerability to share. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and the last of the guests had departed, John and I walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, the city lights twinkling around us. "Thank you, Susan," John said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for pushing me to confront my past, for helping me rediscover my passion." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you, John, for being brave enough to share your truth with me. It hasn't always been easy, but it's brought us closer than ever before." We stopped in front of our house, the familiar structure, a comforting presence in the night. We looked up at the stars, a million tiny lights scattered across the vast expanse of the sky. "What do you think the future holds for us, John?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled. "I don't know, Susan, but I know that whatever it is, we'll face it together, hand in hand, side by side." We walked inside, leaving the past behind us, embracing the present, and looking forward to a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The photographs had been a catalyst, a spark that had ignited a new chapter in our lives. We had learned that even the most unexpected events can lead to growth, understanding, and a deeper connection with the ones we love. And that, I realized, was a story worth telling.